Hi there, and welcome to this Four Skills session. Today we are joined by a special guest. It's very exciting. You may not recognize his face, but you may well recognize his voice as one of our continuity announcers here at Channel 4. So the continuity announcers are those people who, are saying coming up on today's schedule. So you'll be very familiar with the type of work that this person does, but we're going to really delve into kind of what is actually involved on a day-to-day basis in that role. So, with that in mind, Mo, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what a continuity announcer actually does?
Thanks, Stephen. I don't know why I said that like I was on countdown. Anyway, hi, my name's Mo. I'm one of the freelance continuity announcers at Channel 4. So, like Stephen said, very swiftly and concisely, it was pretty good because I can never get it in those few words. But we're the people that link the programs together on air. So when you hear someone at the end of a program throwing forward to the next one, saying that you can go and stream something on all four, that's what we do. And that comes under that very big banner of continuity announcer, which sounds really fuddy-duddy, but basically we are the voice that sit with you through the evening, through Channel 4, Film 4, E4, all the channels, and as well as all four too. So basically, we have power in terms of scripting. So we create our own lines that we say. They have to get approved by a couple of people before they go on air. But we always have in mind what the night's panning out to be like, what the emotions are that are going through the night, and perhaps even what you're feeling too during the week. So the best way that I can describe it to people is, or well, what we do is, and I often get this reaction. I'm at a cafe or I'm having a drink with a friend, and a friend of a friend is there, and they say, "Oh, what do you do?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm a continuity announcer. I'm the guy who like links up the programs on Channel 4." And then this weird reaction comes in where they're like, "Oh my God, you're one of those people." And I'm like, "Yes, I'm one of many people that like I'm very privileged to be part of like a wonderfully talented team, and it's not just me, the individual." And they're like, "Oh, say something, say something." And it always comes to my head that I always have one line buried into my head. I don't even think I've ever used it, but I think it's just something that I've spitballed. So it would be something like, now on Channel 4, boys, today is not about you. Girls, the gifts are in the corner, and Fred is here to help you find the perfect match. With strong and saucy language, here's brand new first dates. So with that, I think you can kind of guess what the role is and also see how it looks. You may have never paid attention too much to it when you've been watching telly, but believe me, we're there and we're there with you through the night as well. And especially when you get to the more heavy hitting programs, or maybe Gogglebox has had a bit of a switch up in what the gogglers are watching, and we need to throw to something important. We'll always be there to tell you what's coming up. So maybe there's strong language, maybe there's something a bit more sincere and severe that's got something to do with something mental health related or particular action that's happening in the scene you're about to watch. We make sure that we give you due warning so that you know what's coming up and that also you can prepare yourself emotionally for it. Because with the breadth of programs that we have on Channel 4, it can go from light to sad, from humorous to dark to serious. So it's got everything. So we're just the middle ground to guide you through the night and the daytime.
Yeah, definitely. You're there as a kind of our friendly co-pilot in
Yeah.
terms of watching TV. I suppose I hadn't thought about the fact that you must get that all the time when you tell people what your job is, that they're like, "Oh, do some for me." I mean, do you use that skill set like outside of that, or will you be like, and coming up on today's lunch schedule, we have a tuna sandwich followed by.
Well, I think when I started doing this job, I've been in it for about for nearly 5 years now. I think I did at the beginning try and just throw it into day-to-day speech to just see. And I think that people always think that there's like a certain rhythm
Mm,
to it. Like people, but as with anything, you listen to someone on the radio, you go, oh, they sound like this. So if I was ever going to be on the radio, I emulate it like this. Or if you hear a commercial on the radio or on telly, you watch it,
mm,
you go, oh, like their tones are like this. You go da 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 da.
mm,
The beauty of continuity, especially on Channel 4, is that we are taken on very kindly by the powers that be ourselves.
mm.
So when you're watching telly and you hear me come on or any of the other announcers that we have been picked because we're just being ourselves, and we're in a position where we've been trusted with helping you, the audience, go through an evening or a daytime of different programs that you're there to watch and join us in. Like it's basically like sitting next to your mate watching telly in that kind of sense, and us commenting, being like, "Hey, have you seen that?" But at the same time, we do it in a way which is that it's welcoming. It's supposed to be comforting. It's not supposed to be like this is this and that is that. It's good to like get into the habit of it when you're starting out because I think you it seems like this big thing and you kind of get scared. I guess sometimes, or
Mm.
I did at the start because I was like, how am I supposed to say this? But as my managers told me, with time, and it all comes with time, eventually you just ease in and then you speak like I'm speaking to you now. You
Mm.
just speak normally, perhaps just a bit slower because I tend to talk very fast. Perhaps fueled by one too many coffees, so I tend not to have any when I'm on shift. But yeah, that's how we do it, and it's always about uplifting. I think that's one of the best things about doing this job for Channel 4. It's like it within that welcoming and bringing people into the family and us all sitting on that one sofa. It's uplifting, it's hopeful, it's
Mm.
joyous, but also it is informative. So you're not being told what's happening as if it's a news broadcast. You're being told what's happening as if it's like, this is about to happen. I'm gonna go boil a kettle and be back in a sec.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the really cool things about this role at Channel 4 is, as you mentioned, it's not about having that kind of, you know, non-specific like British accent and very like monotone to the
Mm.
point. Like with our continuity announcers, it's really about having, real life people doing it and people bringing their personality to it and their own experiences. And yeah, I think that it makes for a much more engaging experience, and I'm sure it makes for a much more interesting job from your point of view as well, that you can bring that part of yourself to work.
Well, of course, I think, unfortunately, I guess I say unfortunately in a way, but like when I tell people, they are always shocked. I'm from Liverpool, so we're just gonna get that out there now. Like the accent was there at some point, but I'm a bit of a mongrel when it comes to accent collections. Now I'm just in a middle ground of nothing. But when I come into the office, and when any of the announcers come into the office, that there's people from Ireland, there's people from Scotland, there's
Mm.
we have people from London, from up north. We have people from internationally as well, from overseas. We've got someone who's from the West Indies with the most glorious accent as well. That
Mm.
I wish that I had. I wish that I had. So there is a bit of like voice envy when you go in,
Yeah.
but when you sit back and you're with everyone collectively, you realize like, wow, this team is actually really varied, and everyone speaks differently.
Mm.
There are no two people who speak the same. There are no two people who use the same tones, the same words. Everyone has their own inflections, and I think that's what creates what you see and what you hear before and at the end of a program, because that's what you want. We are here in this wonderfully diverse country, and we meet people from everywhere. So to have that reflected on telly and know that what you're watching is essentially the same as if you were walking down the street and someone was like, "Hey, catch this tonight,"
Mm.
is very, I think it's very natural. I think it's very easy for people to understand in a way and be like, "Oh, hey, like I might not have necessarily heard that voice walking down the street today, but I might hear it tomorrow. I might hear it the day after." And that doesn't just landlock to the big cities. Like
Yeah.
there's diversity everywhere, and I think that is well and truly reflected by us when we're scripting stuff and we're getting stuff across. Because, like you said, the a voice is a very important thing, and it
Mm.
brings experience with it. It doesn't have to be spelled out because you can just hear it. And I think that's like one of the best things. I could eulogize a lot about the voice because I've been working with my voice and in audio for so long, but like it's always a treat when we come in and we see the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose you've kind of touched on it there in terms of writing the content. So I suppose, and to be fair, I'm guilty of this as well. Before coming to Channel 4, I would have just thought that a continuity announcer was someone who kind of came in for a half an hour, read a bunch of lines that were written down, and weren't actually there live on the day and went off. And because I did used to think that, I was like, oh, these continuity announcers must be like awake at 3 a.m. telling me that, you know, telling me that the Hollyoaks omnibus is about to start. But I suppose tell us a little bit about kind of what like a typical shift at Channel 4 looks like for you and the kind of things that that actually involves, because it's a lot more than just reading off a piece of paper.
Well, yeah, I mean the typical shift. So either we have our daytime shift where you come in at the regular time, same as everyone else, 9:30. And you come in, and as I've mentioned, there's teams everywhere, and we're the continuity team's not separate from the rest of Channel 4. Like we're on desks with all the rest of Channel 4. So there's people that you see and get to meet over time, and you're coming in, and it's kind of like a Bruce Almighty moment. You're like, hey, how's it going? Hey, how's it going? Who wants a coffee? Blah blah blah. And it's a really great way to start the day. But when we actually come to sit down, we'll get open our programs that we use to script,
Mhm,
and we usually are scripting a day in advance, and we'll just have a general look and see what's coming up, and be like, okay, like the day's kind of running like this, and this is kind of the theme more or less in terms of like emotionally for or that's what I think at least. And then we'll get the programs open that we need to actually watch ahead. So I think there's a big misconception from people thinking that we are scripting to the minute before what we say goes out. No, we have plenty of time because everything we say has to get run through at least one or two other people in different teams just to like clear it and make sure
mm,
that nothing that we say is first and foremost going to get the channel in trouble.
mhm,
So nothing without going into like too much media jargon, like nothing libelous, so nothing that's like
mhm,
offensive against someone else, whether that be a celebrity, a public figure, or just an individual that's in the program. Two, that it's not offensive to the audience at home. So I
mhm,
think that there's this other thing where people think that, oh, like Channel 4 is the risky one. Channel 4 is the one that's kind of looking ahead, and Channel 4 is the one that's being brave. It is, but we do that without effing and jeffing, as it were. Like there are other ways to say what we need to say and find the right level without it containing any swearing or any negativity. Like I said, it's all about bringing people in. We're not excluding people. So when I talk about like that intro to first dates, it's not about exclusion. It's not saying like, oh, you guys ain't finding it today. These guys are finding it today.
mhm,
No, it's like everyone's bridging together. Um, so I always have that in mind when I'm scripting. And then obviously the rest of the day is just working at the script. So, we're always looking through watching programs. So we watch the programs that we have lined up during the day and try and take away the best tidbits. Now, everyone has their different methods and
mm,
approaches, and I have been doing it for a while to the point where I can't say necessarily what my methodology is because it seems to change on a day-to-day basis. But because sometimes, it's just like any other job that you do. You come in, sometimes you're a bit more fragile, let's say, that you're a bit more like inwards. So the
mhm,
things that you would bring maybe are a bit tamer than you usually do. Sometimes you're coming in and you're bursting with energy and you can like gather it all holistically and like everything that's coming out is like energy, and then sometimes it's just that nice middle ground. um but each announcer will pick out their certain things, and then we'll formulate it into a script. And when I say we have the freedom with all intents and purposes, apart from the feedback that we get. So like we will get fed back what our scripts say at the end of the day, and what we call read through. So we will literally read our scripts out with other teams on the phone, and they'll either just say, yeah, cool, or they say, oh, maybe change that because we try and be on the ball as possible, but as is human nature, sometimes you slip. So sometimes I'll be like, oh, maybe you should switch the points round. So maybe you're talking about something to go stream, and then you're talking about what's next, but maybe they want that the other way around, for instance. So there's all these conversations that happen as well, and that's what makes it a team effort. Continuity is not, we are not the omnipresent singular voice that's controlling everything. Like it's a pure team effort from the moment that you walk in, and that's why having those ridiculous conversations in the morning by the cafe are very important into inputting what you do during the daytime because it reminds you that we are all part of this one big ecosystem, which fits in bigger to the nation watching telly. So like that same thing that's happening in the cafes, the same thing that's happening at home is, we're not necessarily talking about telly when I'm ordering my flat white, but we are talking and like being human. And that is, and again, one of the key things. Um, so implying and inputting that into the read throughs after that happens, we'll go and we'll record. And once we've recorded, we upload our audio into a system that goes off, and then we go back into our system that we used to script in the first place, and then we add the audio to the
Hmm.
files in the right order with numbers and timings and stuff. So then what you see will go out. So that's one of the shifts, and then the other shift is the peak one. So that's the main one. We call the evening the peak. And that is basically runs from midday till midnight, and that is like that because that is where it's prime time. So we
Mm.
need the time as much as the daytime shift has its time. We also need our time in the evening. So I'll roll up at midday, get sat down, get ready, look at what's coming up in the night time, and do the same things that I was talking about doing during the daytime, but perhaps twice or thrice over for each program,
Mm.
because these are either going to be brand new programs or exclusives, or big hitters like First Dates or Gogglebox. So when we are informing people at home, stick around, watch this, or now's the time for you to watch this. This is what's coming up. It just needs that extra layer of finesse, and that's what we are allowed time for. Then we will have our read through a couple of hours before we go live, and then we go live for the rest of the evening from 6 o'clock onwards, and that is live. So when you hear someone stumble, someone run out of breath, someone confused, that is happening in real time. And I say those things because it's happened to me. I'll be the first one to admit it. Like I've ran out of breath, I've stumbled, I've done all those things. But again, I think that's just what makes it human. And no one's sitting there going, "Oh, you did such a bad job," and
Mm.
the managers aren't sitting there like, "Oh, what on earth's happened here?" It's just human. Sometimes it just happens, and you have to like save it. It makes it weirdly exciting in a way because there's an
Yeah.
adrenaline rush to scramble back to get back to stasis. It's kind of, I always relate it to kind of when you're out in a club and you hear a DJ mix and the DJ's mix is slightly off and you're, oh, are they going to get the song back in time and make it seem flawless? It's the same thing with a lot less time, arguably.
Yeah, I was kind of it's thinking it to the equivalent of like when you were in school and you heard the teacher swear and you're like, "Oh!"
Yeah, exactly.
You're like, "Oh, they are
Exactly.
real human."
Yeah. Which I think confuses a lot of people because, like you said at the top, a lot of people think it's all just a half an hour voiceover session and then that's it. And it's no, it's a whole day's thought and work, and it is a good mix of getting that on air experience and being in situ live as well as doing the behind the scenes stuff and inputting data and creating these things. And that's the key thing I think I maybe even forgot to mention is just being creative.
Mm.
It's taking the information that you have about Come Dine With Me and not just going to air and saying, now we're still in Leeds, here's another dinner. It's
Yeah.
like, how do you raise that? You know, did someone put too much spice in the food? Has someone said something absolutely astronomically out of character, which is something that Come Down With Me often brings
Yeah,
anyway?
yeah.
It's adding those in. So then you turn a very basic and bland script, an intro that may not convince someone to watch, into something that someone goes, oh my word, I have to watch this now because someone has spilled a whole tub of mayo into their apple pie on Come Dine With Me in Leeds. I need to be there for that.
And I suppose, like on that point, and we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier in terms of you were saying like some of our more maybe like lighthearted shows dealing with more, like very real and like touching content like around mental health. But how do you, as that person who is kind of creating the links between these shows and bringing our viewers on a journey, how do you deal with when you go from something like, let's say, for example, a very dramatic episode of Handmaid's Tale where something really gruesome has happened, to then being like, oh, wow, yeah, that was intense. Now let's go over to see Joe Lycett drink cocktails in Seville. Like, how do you manage those tonal shifts that can happen with our programming?
Well, I mean, that's a really good question because I think it could, firstly, the managing it tonally, I think, comes with time
Mm,
because it is not just a skill that immediately happens. And I think I always had it in my head that I'm just not getting it. Why am I not managing to go from really serious to really light? Like, what is this? And then with time, I stepped back and I went, okay, we're here on the sofa with our mate, and we're feeling the same things that they feel. So for instance, as you said, like with Handmaid's Tale, I've announced things like the Caroline Flack documentary
mm,
and the Stephen Graham and Jodie Comer drama Help when they came
mm,
out for the first time. So I was like live in situ. And those are both really heavy programs, the same as The Handmaid's Tale. They're dealing with some really serious source material. And the thing that you have to get into a mind frame of, I think, is just remembering that we are there to emote with the audience, but we're also there to inform. So there is like a slight bit of distance
mm.
because we're the people that have to ultimately get the energy back for it to move forward.
Yeah.
So there's usually an easy way out, as it were, and that would be what we call our support annos. So
Mm,
whenever someone hears this at the end of a program, when we say support information for the issues raised in help can be found online at channel4.com/support. That stock phrase is there 9 times out of 10 on a lot of programs, like 24 hours in police custody or
mm,
24 hours in A&E. And that is really helpful for us as the announcer to get our tone right because we know that we will have just come out of something that's pretty serious.
mm,
And then the following point, so the things we talk about on the end of a program are called points, and they're different to what we talk about on the ident, which is the
mm,
screen going into the program. So the support anno is for the end of the program. So usually that's followed by another point, as it were, that being something pointing to the next program or something pointing to streaming on all four or something pointing to another channel. And like you said, it might be Joe Lycett. It might be Married at First Sight Australia, and it might be something completely different. And we judge it in one of two ways because we've seen the program ahead of time. If the
mm,
program's really serious and we have that support anno, the following point afterwards will just be a straight this program's on next with like minimal detail so then the audience aren't completely confused and just go whatever.
yeah.
But it's definitely not got any light-hearted or uh or it's not got any light-hearted or particularly like revealing traits of the program because we appreciate, as we did when we previewed the shows before the audience get to see them, that like this show's ended really heavily. I can't just make that jump because
Mm,
it sounds insincere as well.
yeah.
And the audience at home are smart. They know that that would sound insincere. And if it's something that perhaps, not all programs end seriously, but they still have a support anno, we just take a second. So we'll say the words, we'll say go to channel4.com/support, take a second, and then let the graphics that you see on screen come in, and then ride those a little bit
Mm,
for some more energy. Not too much, because again, like there's a reason why we're telling people to go to a support website and support page for Channel 4, but like there's enough breathing room in there for us to like shift it onwards. So it's one of the trickiest skills to get. I'm not gonna lie, like it did take some time, but it did. Eventually, when it clicked, um, I knew how to play with that, and I think it beyond all of those techniques, it goes to a really essential skill in, I guess, voiceover work or like radio in general, wider broadcasting. It's what people tend to call in the stupid terms light and shade. So
mm,
light being the positive, shade being the like serious side, and it's that balance. That balance, I think personally, doesn't come without experience.
yeah.
So that doesn't mean um that you just walk around your house trying that all day. It does help, but like, being in real life situations, trying that. So before, Channel 4, I'd been doing radio for Yonks. So
Mm,
I already had a basis in terms of broadcasting, but I just needed, the lovely managers that I have now to guide me into the right direction of creating that light and shade, and also watching other continuity announcers do it. So hearing my fellow colleagues now when they're on air, or hearing my managers, or being in situ with them when they're training me, saying, try this, try that. And your words reflect as well. So the words that you choose also help guide that conversation. So it is a skill that comes with time, and it will come with time. But once you have that in your head, I think it makes it a lot easier, because I think people sit down and they expect to just go, right, I can do this now. And believe me, even with the years of radio experience that I had, it's not the same medium. So there are slight changes that need to happen. It doesn't mean that I have a continuity voice. I just have my voice. And
yeah.
I think that's another misconception. People think that you need to talk in a certain way. You just talk like yourself. All those skills come with time. And eventually you have your continuity persona, like you have your real life persona, like you
Mhm.
have your radio persona. It's all there. It's just a time thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose for anyone listening who or watching, who are kind of considering, oh, this sounds like a really cool career or something that I think I potentially could be good at. What are kind of the traditional paths to, you've mentioned radio, which kind of makes sense, in terms of
Mhm.
using your voice and then also writing copy and understanding, the flow of things. Yeah, so what are kind of some of the potential career paths that someone could take to getting involved in this kind of role?
I honestly, I'll mention radio again, only
Hmm.
because some of my colleagues that I have now all came from radio, and I didn't know this until very recently either. So I was actually kind of annoyed. I was like, why didn't you tell me before? There's this whole like radio clan from times gone by. And I think that is like one of the really good ways of getting in, because they're all the skills that you said. So you have to write for something, a subject material, that being TV shows. You have to do on-air mic work, so you have to speak over music in radio.
Hmm.
Uh, in on the telly, it's also technically music on the bits that we call the idents going into the programs. There is some music there, so it kind of have a similar feel. Or the end credits of shows where there is also music. So like it does bring a lot of skills. And like my radio journey, what started off at university, in Leeds. I was doing student radio there, and then I ended up interning at the BBC for a bit, and then that's where I met fellow colleague from continuity at Channel 4,
Hmm.
Gully. This He has the most beautiful Scottish voice. It's incredible. And I just remember asking him, because I saw it on one of his social media accounts, that he said he was an announcer, and I was like, "What is that?" And he was like, "Oh, have you never, uh, the bits that we do in between the programs?" And I was like, "Oh, okay." And he was like, and he said what a lot of people are, unique voice. I was like, oh, thanks. He was like, maybe you should give it a go. And I was like, what? What are you on about? He was like, yeah, yeah, just go away, record something, send it to me, and I'll send it off. So I remember going and watching the continuity happen on telly, going on YouTube and like going through like videos and videos of continuity, because there are clips of it up there,
Hmm.
and going, okay, so this is what the job is. So how would I do it? So I picked out some programs that I like watching, like Come Dine with Me, like Coach Trip, and all that. I scripted some stuff. I recorded it in the radio studio of the radio station that I'm at, represent in Brixton, and I sent it to Gully, my colleague, and in my head I was like, oh, this is honestly, like, this is trash. I literally said, I was like, I'm so sorry, like, just take this away from me. He sent it, and then I got an email from one of my bosses being like, "Oh, do you want to come in for like a trial shift?" I was like, "Oh, this is ridiculous!" Like, because it didn't compute with me. I was like, "No way, this is like pipe dreamy." Because there's always the idea that people have in their head of like, "Oh, I was just sitting in a cafe. I was having my full English. Someone overheard me and went, 'You've got a voice. You're going to be a star.'" Like, it's not like that at all.
They didn't turn to you
There's
and say
no,
you've got a face for radio.
yeah, yeah, yeah. More so that. So, and then so there's no strict way of getting in, because I went and did that trial shift, and I met my bosses and the people I work with now. I came out feeling a bit more confident, but still very perplexed. And then they emailed me saying, "Great, you're in. You've got like 12 weeks for like a trial period to train on like doing the evening shifts, on doing the day